Good afternoon. Billy had begun to murmur and hum again. He uttered a series of short, gurgling gasps as the boa encircled his neck. It hung there, apparently listening to him, and slowly Billy's body became visible again. Wow, it can do it, said Charlie. It really can. Ask the boa if it can do the same thing to another boy, said Gabriel, a boy that it hugged into vanishment. Billy continued to hum, and the boa replied with more chuckling and hissing. It says it will. Billy told them, if we promise not to put it in a jar. For hundreds of years, it was kept in blue liquid with the bones of a bird until Mr. Ezekiel revived it. That's why it's got feathers. I told it that we'd never put it in a jar, that we'd take it somewhere safe. Billy glanced at Charlie. I hope that's true. It is, said Charlie. I promise no one will harm it. Okay, said Billy. Now what? We take it to the kitchen, said Charlie. Billy got to his feet and cautiously descended the rickety steps with the boa still happily wrapped around his neck. Hope we can get it off him, Gabriel whispered to Charlie, and they made their way along the passage. I wonder what it eats. Who knows? Charlie suddenly remembered another task. He took the jar of best strawberry conserve from the pocket of his pajamas and called softly, Ollie Sparks, are you there? I brought you some jam. But the building was still under the spell of wind and spirits. Charlie's words were drowned, and there was no reply. As they approached the main hall, the whistling and sighing of the wind intensified. Now and again, a pale shape would glide beside them, and shining spear or feathered arrow would sail over the heads. Billy, quite undaunted by all the supernatural activity, led the way while the boa whispered into his ear. They came to the landing and, looking down into the long flagstoned hall, beheld the source of the magical night. Two figures whirled and spun across the floor. They moved so fast their green capes looked like the sparkling wings of a dragonfly. It would have been impossible to tell them apart if it hadn't been for their heads, one black and the other a flashing, flickering yellow. Billy was about to lead the way down the main staircase when he gave a shriek of horror. A giant spider had dropped from the ceiling and now crouched on the steps in front of him. It was as big as Billy, with eyes like red coals and 8 legs covered in coarse black hair. Keep calm, said Gabriel. It's not what it seems. He moved in front of the others and began to walk down to the spider. The giant creature suddenly leapt onto the banister and swung into the hall on a silver thread as thick as a finger. It landed in front of Tancred, whose whirling body faltered and then stopped moving altogether. His cape drooped and his shoulders sagged. He stared at the spider, his face white with horror, and the wild wind that had filled the building died away. Don't stop, Tancred, called Gabriel. It's her, Yolanda. But don't be afraid. She can't hurt you. But Tancred couldn't move. Yolanda had chosen her shape with insight and cunning, and Tancred was paralyzed with terror. So Gabriel had to face the spider himself. Wrapping, bra- Wrapping brave Mr. Baldova's cape tightly around himself, he ran into the hall, shouting, Here, Yolanda, here, you old hag. What can you do to me? Huh? The spider turned her front legs, reaching for Gabriel, her red eyes blazing, and Gabriel leapt away, but one glance at the hypnotizing stare had already made him dizzy, and then Billy walked past him crying, You can't do it to me, Yolanda. I can't be hypnotized. Not by you, not by anything. And the boa Billy, that was Billy's now body had and soul lunged at the spider with a hiss that swept through the hall, making the great creature shudder and shrivel. Tancred smiled and raised his arms with his green wings. He stirred the air, and the wind returned, sending the spider sliding across the floor. The little troop, with Billy at its head, continued its journey to the kitchen. But just before they left the hall, a dreadful howl made them look back. The beast Charlie had seen in the ruins stood at the top of the staircase. It was surrounded by tall, ghostly figures in pale robes. Their arms were covered in gleaming bracelets, and the tips of the long spears reached over their heads. The beast won't be moving far tonight, Charlie said grimly. The three boys hurried down the corridor of portraits, and Gabriel brought out his flashlight to light their way. Cook was waiting for them by the door of the blue cafeteria with a wicker hamper at her feet. Uncle Peyton had kept his word. The hamper even had wheels. My, oh my, said Cook. You're a brave boy, Billy. Will your snake come into the basket, do you think? Billy whispered to the boa, but the creature still clung to him. He hummed and hissed in a soft, coaxing voice, and gradually the snake loosened its grip. Billy lifted it from his neck and gently laid it in the basket. It will do what you want now, he said. Thank you, Billy. Cook closed the lid and fastened it with a leather strap. Everything is taken from me, Billy murmured sadly. Everything. And his eyes filled with tears. Not always, said Cook. You'll soon be seeing a friend of yours. Rembrandt's the name, if I'm not mistaken. Really? Billy wiped his nose and beamed with delight. And what's news of Ollie Sparks? To my shame, I haven't been able to get any food to the poor mite. That man Whedon has been watching my every move. We seem to have temporarily lost him, Charlie confessed, but we'll find him, Cook. We won't give up. It had better be soon, Charlie. Cook gave a sigh. Off you go now, you three. I'll take care of this. She picked up the hamper and disappeared into the cafeteria. Accompanied by the singing wind and a host of darting spirits, the three boys hurried back upstairs. They passed Tancred and Lysander still working their magic in the great hall, but the spider and the beast had vanished. Gabriel and Billy were ahead of Charlie, and he had just turned into the passage that led to his dormitory when a hand clutched his wrist. Charlie nearly jumped out of his skin. It's me, said a voice. Ollie Sparks. Ollie? Charlie whispered. I've got something for you. Jam? Said Ollie. I heard you. Best strawberry conserve, said Charlie. Here. He held out the jam. Wow, my favorite. Thanks, Charlie. It was hard to see what was happening, but Charlie felt the jar being tugged out of his hand and disappearing. Ollie, I've got some good news, he said. We found a way to make you appear. But somehow you'll have to get out of the building. Emma made this to cover your toe. Here, it's a spider. Ollie gave a low chuckle, and the spider was taken out of Charlie's hand. This will be very useful, but I'm not going out while I'm still invisible. Where would I go? Charlie gave him Miss Ingledew's address. It's close to the cathedral, and she'll look after you until you're cured. How will I be cured? Asked Ollie suspiciously. Charlie realized he would have to mention the boa. He described Billy's strange disappearing and reappearing act. It'll work, trust me, said Charlie. The boa? Squeaked Ollie. No way. It'll finish me off. But you are finished, said Charlie. In a way. I mean, being invisible is a pretty miserable existence, isn't it? Don't you want to go home to your parents? Think about it. Don't you want your brother to see you as a real whole boy? There was a long silence, then a sigh, and Ollie's voice came floating out of the dark again. Yes, he said. Yes, I do. Charlie felt guilty about mentioning Mr. Baldova or Samuel Sparks for a moment. He thought of telling Ollie the truth, that they didn't really know where his brother was. But when he spoke Ollie's name, there was no reply, and he realized the invisible boy must have drifted away. I hope he gets out, thought Charlie, or it'll all be for nothing. Cook carried the hamper back to her secret room behind the kitchen, and when she got there, she stood on a chair and opened the skylight in her low-beamed ceiling. It'll just about fit, she said to herself. 3 pairs of glowing eyes looked down from the darkness above her. Ah, there you are, she said. Good cats. I've got a package for you. Here it comes, and she lifted the hamper up through the skylight. Any sleepless citizen glancing through their window that starry morning would have seen a strange sight indeed. 3 large cats were running through the empty streets, one yellow, one orange, and one a wild copper red. Their fur was touched with fiery gold, and their whiskers flashed like silver. Each cat held in its mouth the end of a leather strap, and behind them they pulled a wheeled wicker basket. What could it contain? A stolen baby, priceless jewels, or a feast for a party? No one would have guessed the truth. The bright creatures ran through the town until they reached a green door at the end of a narrow alley. The door opened, and a very small man appeared. Well done, my beauties, said Mr. Onimus. Now, let's have a look at your treasure.